Alright, this is about that quote that everybody loves. And obviously it's been around for a long time and lots of people have talked about it. From the God delusion that the God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all of fiction. Now, the thing I want to say about that is, to my atheist friends, if you're going around repeating this and you haven't read the Old Testament, I mean, what makes you think you know anything about the God of the Hebrew Scriptures if you haven't even cracked them yet? Now, I know that there are those of you who have read the Old Testament for one reason or another, and for that I say thank you. I appreciate that. To a lot of you, I would say my thank you is about this big. That's for those of you who only read the Old Testament so that you could look for things that you don't like in there, and then you could share those quotes on the internet with other people outside of their context. For that doesn't really get any respect from me or any fair-minded person, I would think. Obviously, if you want to interact with this book, you need to read it in such a way that you're getting the message that the author is trying to communicate. Okay? Now, you might think Christians don't read the Old Testament, probably because a lot of people who call themselves Christians don't read the Old Testament. But I'm here to tell you that I, for one, do. And I know that serious-minded Christians read this book. And the reason we read it is not because we have to, that we're trying to check off some box. The reason I read this book every morning is because it's spiritual food. And I'll tell you what I think of the God of the Old Testament. When I read the Old Testament, when I listen to the Word of God being communicated, I love the God of the Old Testament. Okay? And if you don't see that, maybe you didn't know that that's there. You've only seen certain quotes that have been taken from different books, or laws that you find hard to understand, or judgments that seem too severe to you. Okay? God is not like us. Right? And the Bible presents a complete picture that you have this God who is incredibly severe when it comes to sin. But that's because God's not like us. We want to excuse it, sweep it under the rug, pretend like it doesn't exist. Not the Bible. The people of God throughout the book are not presented as some people who don't have any sins. They're presented painfully, bluntly, and plainly, and the consequences that go along with that. But along with that, you have this character of God. And if you read the whole thing, you read what the people are like, and you read the way God interacts with them, you have to be amazed at the depths of patience and compassion that are demonstrated. Now, I understand that the Old Testament is a long book. You should read the whole Bible. But it's a long book, and if you don't believe that it's true, that's quite an investment to make. So let me lower the bar just a little bit. I think you should read at least one book. And I'm not going to try and pick the fluffiest, happiest little book. If I was going to do that, I'd probably pick Ruth. They get married at the end. It's very happy. Now here's what I want you to read. You know how long it is? This long. Now the whole book is pretty much one long judgment oracle on the northern kingdom of Israel, who was engaging in rampant idolatry and all of the injustice that always attended that. So it is not an easy read. But look at the characterization of God throughout this book. Look at the way that he deals with his people. Look at the way that Hosea's marriage to Gomer is symbolic of God's relationship with his people, and try to comprehend why there are those of us who read the book in its entirety And we hear the message that's being proclaimed about the God who is so glorious in all of his attributes, both justice and mercy, severity and love, and why this is a God worth worshiping. Okay. So, again, if you haven't read it, you don't know what you're talking about. Stop posting the tweets and the Facebook messages like somebody told you that this is what the Old Testament is like and you don't even really know because you haven't read it. Okay? That's ridiculous. I'm not going to go around saying things about the Quran unless I've read it. Okay? I think you should do the same. I wanted to add a postscript. If a video can have a postscript. There's a certain group of people who are going to hear the beginning of that and say, no, that's not me. I read the Old Testament, but I wasn't quote mining for bad things, right? Some of you used to call yourselves Christians. And you would say that you came to the Old Testament looking for something good, and what you actually found is what drove you away from practicing Christianity. So you're going to say, my earlier description doesn't fit you, and I get that. My response to that would be, what were you expecting when you came to the Old Testament? Because unfortunately, a lot of what is taught, especially in Sunday school, is not that God is the great bully in the sky, but that God is the great teddy bear in the sky. And all of the tough issues, the severe attributes of God, are just edited out. And you've been presented this false picture of God that is not biblical and it's not true. And then when you turn to the real Bible, and that's what you were looking for, you found something different. And that's what pushed you away. What I would say is that's not any better. If you come to the Old Testament looking for Richard Dawkins' version of God, you're going to find that. If you come to the Bible looking for, the Santa Claus, right, and you find out that he's not in there, well, that's because he's not real. That God who does not execute judgment and does not have wrath and does not care if his people are worshiping false gods. That's not the real God. So if you approach it with an open mind, saying not, let me find the God that I was looking for, but let me find out what God is actually like, I think you're going to come to a more balanced perspective. That's what I would say about that.